My name's Eleanor Ragg, and I'm a senior reporter with GTR. Joining me for today's conversation are Niels Nijens, Program Director at the Digital Container Shipping Association, and Gadi Ruschin, co-founder and CEO of Wave. Welcome to both of you. During this session, we'll be addressing audience questions, so I encourage you all to submit your questions via the Q&A function. So one of the clearest lessons that we've learned from the last few months is that paper-based documentation really represents a serious bottleneck to global trade. In effect, digitalization is no longer a nice to have. It's fundamental to keeping the wheels of trade turning, especially during a crisis. So as exporters and financiers alike have sought out alternatives to physical transfers of documents, a new initiative led by the DCSA seeks to develop open source standards for the electronic bill of lading, or EBL, including definitions and terminology to facilitate communication among customers, container carriers, regulators, financial institutions, as well as other industry stakeholders. So Niels, welcome again. To kick us off, can you give us a brief overview of the DCSA initiative to standardize the EBL?
Yes, thank you, and thanks for having me. So basically, what you just spelled out on our initiative is in a nutshell what we are doing. We, for those of you who don't know DCSA, we are an association founded by 9 container carriers, and together with our members, but then next to that, also with a lot of other stakeholders in the industry, we've indeed started an initiative on standardization and digitization for the bill of lading. We do that together with our members, but given the importance of the industry participation, we've also been talking to a lot of industry stakeholders, let's say, so solution providers like Wave, but also a lot of banks, regulatory institutions. We've talked to, for example, the World Customs Organizations. There are many parties, let's say, involved in the process of let's say a global trade. So getting all of their input into our initiative in order to be able to do a standardization of the bill of lading, which is then a lot about the data elements and what should be on there and what should not be on there, and then also making the next step in terms of digitizing that, which means from a DCSA perspective, defining things like logical data models, interface standardization, all the way down to API specifications. And we all do that in the deliverables we produce are standards, which are then hopefully are being picked up by the industry, right? So especially with our members, but then also with the other stakeholders, let's say, in this process in the industry. We produce all of our standards open source, which means they're available for everybody. And again, we collaborate with as many of the industry stakeholders as we can in order to get it right and in order to drive the adoption, because that's in the end why we are doing this.
Fantastic. Thanks, Niels. And Gadi, from your point of view, I mean, as an electronic bill of lading vendor supplier, what role is Wave playing with the DCSA at the moment to achieve this?
So first of all, our main role is to enjoy the fruits of their very good and hard work, because once, of course, 9 carriers are promoting a specific standardization, and of course, digitization is something that the entire industry, of course, the service providers will enjoy as well. We are going through a very similar journey, which means that DCSA would be going through making market research and check everything that the different stakeholders are interested in. Of course, we are all very familiar with the sentence that just like Henry Ford said, that if we would ask customers what would they want, they will ask for faster horses. So we also need to take it under the right measures of understanding of the euphoria that everyone wants to get to. But in practice, we are a technology provider. We know what the industry wants from all the different sectors, because we work with banks, with 5 different carriers, with hundreds of corporate clients all around the world. And we are very focused on digitization, or creating the pipelines for the information to be moving through, and of course, we can share our views. So we are trying to present our findings from our activity. Again, it's not exactly the same, but it's very complementary, and we try to help and to support.
Excellent, thanks. A question's just come in, Niels, and I think it's important we address it now. One of the audience asks, what sort of reach does the DCSA have across the shipping industry? You know, what percentage of the sector is it, and how do you consult with them?
So thanks for that question. So basically, as part of our association, we have 9 carriers, which altogether represent over 70% of global container trade. So I would say we have a pretty good reach, and we collaborate with all of our members to set the standards. And that's not only about EBL, but it's also about other topics, like we've been working on operational vessel schedules, on track and trace. We're doing just-in-time port call optimization, all such topics. And we really, and I want to stress that here, we really intensively collaborate with our members. So that means for all of our projects, we have dedicated subject matter experts of our carriers allocated to these projects, which work closely together with us during the course of our initiatives. But as mentioned, we publish our standards open source, which means we're not here only to address it from a carrier perspective, but standards are only useful if they are widely adopted. So we need to make sure we take into account as much as possible let's say, the industry voice as well. And that's the reason why we also collaborate with a lot of companies, organizations out there, in order to get their point of view and in order to get their requirements in as well, in order to serve the industry. But to state again, our reach in terms of the carriers is over 70% of global container trade. So yeah, we're very happy with it.
Fantastic, thanks for that. One question that springs to mind around this initiative is, why now? What's the impetus for standardizing the EBL? What are the issues driving this? And I think if we go to Niels first, and then hopefully, Gadi, you'll be able to add your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I guess, although we're all facing difficult times currently with COVID-19, obviously, this has been the momentum is there. So the process is the current process, let's say, is highly manual or physical, which means over the past months, let's say 3/4 of a year almost, there have been a lot of difficulties in terms of releasing cargo and so on, just because of the physical process, distributing all of the documentation that are required in the end-to-end documentation process. So that's, I would say, again, it's a tough time that we are in, but the time could not have been better in terms of now taking the initiative as an industry to start standardizing and digitizing this process. And I also want to stress here that it should not only look at the bill of lading or that specific step and that specific document in the process, but the opportunity is now there to also include the steps before the bill of lading and the steps that come after the releasing of the bill of lading to standardize and digitize that as well. Yeah, maybe let's open up the floor for Gadi here as well to share his point of view on that.
Go ahead, Gadi. What's your take?
I think that we should have done it 10 years ago, of course, but unfortunately there is a saying in the B2B world, and actually it's a very famous saying, if something ain't broken, don't fix it. Savings of $150 or even $150 per shipment, or facing a situation where bills of lading, it's a paper document, it tends to get lost every now and then. Naturally, of course, and the risk they were just not big enough of an incentive for the industry to make the change, because change is always complicated and it takes time and it takes a lot of efforts. I don't want to speak in Neil's name, but I can say that already last year but also some of the members were pushing very hard towards standardization of the bills of lading. The stars aligned, and as Neil said, of course, the Corona or the COVID-19, here in Israel we still call it Corona, the COVID-19 epidemic pointed out how right of the timing was, because now paper bill of lading is not just inefficiency and not just antiquated process. Now it's an actual barrier to many trade and to many participants. So this is the right time. It should have been done before, but at least it's happening now. Now the positive thing is that it will also stay after, which means that the COVID-19 will be gone eventually. It will not stay here forever, most likely. But the savings and the efficiency, which are a game changer to trade, of course, will stay also after.
Thanks very much. Another question's come through, and it actually leads me to my next question. So an audience member's asked around legal issues, and this has been true of many bankers that I've spoken to, that GTR has spoken to for recent articles. Many people have pointed to the fact that the EBL isn't legally recognized as a document of title, and we saw recently the ICC called upon all jurisdictions to adopt that UNCITRAL model law on electronic transferable records, which would obviously address this, but we haven't seen too much traction there. So Gadi, from your point of view, is this actually a sticking point to adoption? And do you think that this standardization initiative might help to drive that legal recognition of the EBL?
You're very accurate to say that many bankers asked you. Everyone else around the globe are already digitizing their business. Of course, bills of lading are used not only when banks are involved. Every exporter knows that by holding the physical paper, he has full control over it, and by that he can ensure that the payment will arrive, whether banks are involved or not. Having global recognition of an EBL as a legal document of title, of course, will be excellent. It will promote, it will support, it will be much easier for everyone to adopt. But every service provider will have its own rules. Sometimes it's called a rule book. We call it bylaws. These are very general, which works for everyone along the chain. It provides specifically and sorry for speaking specifically about web, it provides, it's basically a translation of the COGSA 1992, which are the rules of how bills of lading should behave. We are already working on 100% paperless transactions with EBL to the most complicated jurisdictions such as Brazil. We completed shipments already this month, even to Brazil and to other countries which are extremely paper-based. It is 100% supported all around the world under not as an official document of title, but as under a contractual obligation. Sorry, I'm not the company's legal. So I'm not using the most accurate terminology, but it will help, but it's not a necessity. It's more of a nice to have than a must. This is at least what we are experiencing. As I said, we already had electronic documents traveling all around the world. I think that one of the main issues is that there was never, at least not to my knowledge, there was never a commercial dispute that reached court on a paper bill of lading. So this is an unknown. Once we will have the first case, and hopefully it will not happen very soon, but eventually, once we will have case, we will be able to verify that courts actually do consider this as an electronic, as an original document, and then the problem will be gone. Because in my perspective, waiting for all the jurisdictions all around the world to accept and to change the law is a very long mission, and by far digitization will happen before.
Great. Niels, from your perspective, I mean, do you think that perhaps, your initiative could help drive legal recognition of the EBL? Is it the sort of chicken and egg situation? How does it look from your viewpoint?
Yeah, so a couple of reflections on Gadi's comments. I guess his last point is very much true. Digitization will happen anyways, and will probably go faster. Nevertheless, another point also made by Gadi, which I want to state here as well, is that certainly our point of view is that it will improve adoption. Having it settled in terms of regulations, let's say, that will definitely help the adoption of electronic bills of lading. But it won't be an easy task indeed. Like that's why we're also super excited about the collaboration that we have with ICC in order to push this forward. And it will take time, but I guess also, you know, these initiatives, like we're after the collaboration within the industry, companies such as the Wave from by Gadi, you know, are all very good examples of why the industry needs this, and it will hopefully speed up the process as well. Again, we've seen it happening in other industries, such as in the aviation industry, that it will take time. And we anticipate for our industry as well that it will take time, but hopefully these initiatives and the situation that we're globally in right now will also speed up that process. Again, want to state here again that we do believe that the model law will ease is maybe not the right word, but ease the adoption of electronic bills of lading, also taking into account like the bylaws or the rule books that Gadi was just referring to.
Excellent, thank you. Another question that I had was sort of around your mission statement. So, you know, the DCSA's mission statement talks about creating these digital standards for the EBL, which, you know, sounds like a great idea, enabling interoperability between all stakeholders. So that also includes system providers. But you know, if you standardize something, given the number of different EBL vendors there are in the market, could that lead to consolidation? You know, what might be the implications of this? Niels, I'll take your take on this first, and then Gadi's ideas.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's the opposite. I don't think it will lead to consolidation. I guess driving or enabling the industry by putting forward standards, or it will enable the industry to actually have more potentially more solution providers. We believe interoperability is one of the key things that we should be looking after in the industry, making it easier again through standardization and digitization for industry stakeholders, let's say. So that's not only carriers but also carriers to customers and so on, to collaborate through the use of technology. And we believe that should also be helpful in the case of electronic bills of lading. And I fully understand the let's say the issue that we are, or the challenges we're facing when it comes to blockchain solutions. But still, having the opportunity to share, so very specifically, bills of lading through multiple platforms, that should increase the adoption. I know I'm happy to take or to listen to Gadi's point of view. I already know where he's coming from, yeah, again, blockchain interoperability is a difficult one. But in terms of adoption and if you have a look at the numbers, the current numbers in terms of EBL adoption, there's so much room for improvement in that area, and therefore adoption, that we strongly believe that interoperability is one of the elements amongst some of the other elements that we already discussed in this conversation that would actually drive that.
Thanks very much. Gadi, what's your perspective on this?
Sure. So let me surprise you. Yes, no, I'm joking. Interoperability comes in. You have many layers and levels of interoperability. I do believe that system must connect, but in an utopic world, all the different systems, all the different providers will be aligned on the exact same standards, and then you will and then everything will be perfect. But unfortunately, the world is never perfect, and connecting two blockchain solutions is a major challenge. And this is on the technology level. My personal views is actually that the legal infrastructure are actually much more complicated, or is much more challenging, because whenever you migrate between one service provider to a different service provider, you actually create one connection, which will eventually become a principal to the transaction, and the entire concept of decentralization, which is achieved by paper, is going to be harmed, which means that interoperability will actually harm or reduce the ability to mirror how trade uses the paper today, which is paper is completely autonomous, and this is what we believe will be adopted by the industry. When a bank holds a bill of lading, he cannot rely on a third party, regardless who the third party is. On top of that, you also have business models which needs to be attended. So I do believe in interoperability. But the question is, what kind of interoperability? Which means that I do believe that the exact same bill of lading should be used by the carrier, by the bank, by the buyer, the seller, if we use a letter of credit, but we also want to, and for that, of course, we need the bill of lading, but we will also need to have the same document for a track and trace system. So I believe that eventually the systems will connect in order to eliminate the different digital islands. However, I believe that eventually the market will be consolidated, and there will be a standard, just like which means that I believe that eventually the industry will select a single service provider, and hopefully it will be waived, but I'm almost sure that eventually it will go in this way.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Niels, do you have any further comments you'd like to make on that before I turn to our audience questions?
No, it's thanks for that. But it's an interesting conversation. I'm very happy to hear from Gadi that he also supports, standardization and the level, like I mentioned, interoperability. Blockchain interoperability is a very difficult topic, I would say, or a challenge, let's say. I think the future needs to point out how far we can go with interoperability, but we are still at the position again to at least try our best to enable that, and again, let's see to what level we can get.
Sounds good. One interesting question that's come in, and I think this is one for you, Gadi, is, the electronic bill of lading is just one small piece of the puzzle, right? When it comes to digitizing trade, there's a whole kind of end-to-end process that all needs to be digitized. And the question from the audience is around, whether or not the different stages of the digitization ecosystem are starting to talk to each other. So, involvement in consortia such as Contour. Now, Gadi, obviously you can only speak for Wave, but from your perspective, are you integrating yourself into the whole chain? Are you speaking with other players?
So first of all, I can speak in everyone's name. They will just not support it afterwards. But in general, yes, of course, we are connected to many different consortiums. We are very unique, and one of the problems in trade is that everything sounds more or less the same. But Contour, of course, is not a competitor to Wave, which means that they are not developing, or at least not that I'm aware of, not developing a bill of lading. Same thing is for all other banking-led platforms, which means that they develop better trade finance tools, but they still need to get the documents from somewhere. I'm not saying that bill of lading is is the only place that we need it's not the only problem that we need to solve, but the bill of lading is the main bottleneck, which means that certificates and of course, invoice, packing list, all the normal documents are something that you can find technological solutions for. The bill of lading is the center of every trade transaction, which means that it appears in all transactions and is an actual barrier because it is a bill. Same thing, by the way, is bills of exchange, prom notes, and many others. specifically in Wave, of course, this is exactly what we solve, which means that it's a documentary solution, but we spread for all documents, but we don't go into the specific trade finance tools. For that, of course, we cooperate. We are already fully integrated into some of the leading solutions. Fintechs or consortiums, we are still not integrated, but we will get there eventually. But we also work with the banking industry directly, which means that a bank will receive documents. Once you eliminate the need to transfer the documents between the different steps, and you can extract the data thanks to Niels's work and automatically check and make the data matching and the sanction screening, you already improve the industry by an unbelievable amount, which means that the savings will be huge. Of course, if we will also develop better letters of credit, it will be a more holistic solution, but you cannot change everything in a single day. We are very focused on the digitization, and we cooperate. This is our strategy, to cooperate with anyone who is doing track and trace, which means that all the solutions and consortiums on the logistics side of the business, as well as the trade finance or the banking side. And there are also other things which we are also cooperating with.
Excellent.
This will be, in my perspective, an excellent way for interoperability.
Excellent. And Niels, from your perspective, you mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation that you are partnering with the ICC, I believe you said. What are you doing to make sure that this work that you're doing doesn't exist just in a silo and sort of includes all the industry stakeholders and not solely container shippers, for example?
Yeah, so as mentioned before, yes, we are we represent the carriers in this conversation, but as mentioned before, we talk to a lot of industry stakeholders to cover the end-to-end process. So that means solution providers, that means banks, that means ICC, but also, for example, as I mentioned before, the World Customs Organization. We look at it from a we want to look at it from an end-to-end perspective in terms of, let's say, documentation process, but also holistically in terms of all stakeholders in the process. And to add to that, what I was really happy about is that we could tell in some of the conversations where it was said that some of the other stakeholders were not necessarily happy or moving forwards, let's say, with this, with digitizing the bill of lading. Is that all the industry participants, let's say, in the trade process we've talked to are all happy or are all super excited about taking on this project, not our project obviously, but let's say the industry project to make this now happen. So I guess that's important to understand as well. But again, we don't want to leave out any of the important stakeholders that are part of the process, because it can only work if everybody joins. Otherwise, you will still have these bottlenecks in the process, which will eventually then take it back to a manual process, or a physical process. So again, everybody in the full end-to-end chain should be part of it, and that's what we at least try to accommodate.
Excellent, thank you. Final question for you both on your final comments, really. So, as we've discussed, this has been something that, as Gadi said, should have been done a long time ago. COVID-19 has brought it into sharp focus. As a final comment, where do you see the future state of the EBL? What are the key opportunities and challenges ahead? What are your objectives? I'll give you both a minute each. Niels, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think I can be very, very short. So I guess you mentioned it yourself, digital trade, right? Or we here at the office, we every now and then call it paperless trade. And that's then again end-to-end. So it should not only, yes, our focus has been for now on BL, but actually in the conversation of the standardization, digitization of the bill of lading, we already start to look at it holistically. So taking all the way from shipping instructions or booking requests to shipment release process and so on. So we should be looking at it end to end for now, for us at least, with a focus on the EBL or the bill of lading, and get the first standards and initiative focused on that. But in the end, it should be all about digital trade or paperless trade, how you want to call it, but at least taking into account all of the steps in the process. Because again, if there are steps that are not digitized or and standardized, then we still have these blockers in terms of doing things physically, which will be blockers in the process, let's say. So our aim, and that's the opportunity, what we see is taking this end to end and really driving digital trade / paperless trade.
Thank you. Over to you, Gadi, for your final thoughts.
So we are a startup, so we don't have any problems and issues. We have challenges. So we believe that the challenges that are actually currently that exist today is that it's very hard to present to many industry participants that digital trade is not a dream. We don't need to wait for the model law to be accepted. Again, everything will help and everything will be done, but it's actually happening. And it's a completely different mindset, which means that today we need to make a lot of, we use many tactics in order, for example, to present to a bank that now is the right time and not in 2 years, because in 2 years already all his customers will be onboarded, because the carriers today, they are creating webinars on a daily basis to onboard just all their customers. And specifically, this is what is happening today with Wave. But I'm sure that also other service providers are sharing a similar experience. We are talking about dozens of customers which are joining on a weekly and sometimes even on a daily basis. We believe that eventually more talking about it a lot, creating many case studies will help, because it will not take 20 or even 10 years to digitize trade. When the technology is right and the timing is right, digitization spreads very, very fast. When it's not the right time or not the right technology, then it's just not happening. And we consider the pre-corona situation. Wave, for example, was more or less on zero. And now it is building up very, very fast. So Wave is already in the market for 5 years, but we only started now. Luckily enough, we were already prepared with the technology. But in general, the time have completely changed. And now digital trade is a part of, is no longer to save money or to promote efficiency. It's to ensure business continuity. And this is how the majority of the industry, or not the majority yet, but this is what will happen very soon.
Excellent. Well, we're out of time, so thank you both for your comments today. Thank you as well to our audience for their engagement, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.